The mysterious summons. The night was quiet, with only the soft hum of machines filling the air in Ethan Cross's small observatory. He loved his job, spending hours staring at the stars and recording data about distant galaxies. For Ethan, the universe was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Little did he know, this night would change his life forever. Ethan sipped his coffee, its warmth comforting against the chilly air. His computer screen glowed with numbers and graphs, all normal readings from his telescope. Suddenly, the monitor flickered. Ethan frowned and tapped a few keys. The flickering stopped, replaced by a strange message. At first, Ethan thought it was a glitch. The words on the screen weren't in any language he recognized, yet somehow he understood them perfectly. Your presence is required by the Intergalactic Tribunal. Refusal is not an option. What in the world? Ethan muttered. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was overturned. But the message didn't disappear. It just stayed there, glowing on his screen like a warning. Before Ethan could react, the lights in the observatory dimmed. A strange humming sound grew louder, making his coffee cup rattle on the desk. He stood up, his heart pounding. Outside the observatory's window, the stars seemed to shimmer unnaturally, like they were alive. Suddenly, a bright beam of light shot down from the sky, cutting through the darkness. It wasn't just any light. It felt alive, pulsating with energy. Ethan tried to back away, but the light seemed to pull him toward it. His body froze, unable to move. "Is this some kind of joke?" Ethan shouted, his voice trembling. But deep down, he knew this was no prank. The beam of light engulfed him, and in an instant, he was gone. When Ethan opened his eyes, he wasn't in the observatory anymore. He was lying on a smooth, cold surface, surrounded by walls that glowed faintly. The air smelled different, cleaner but oddly metallic. He sat up, his head spinning. "Where am I?" he whispered. "Welcome, human," a voice echoed, soft but commanding. Ethan turned to see a group of figures standing before him. They were humanoid but unmistakably alien. Their skin shimmered like silver, and their eyes glowed softly, radiating intelligence. They wore long, flowing robes that seemed to move on their own. One of them stepped forward. She was taller than the others, her presence demanding attention. "I am High Judge Lerna, leader of the female tribunal. You have been brought here to fulfill a critical duty." Ethan blinked, trying to process what he was seeing. "Wait, female tribunal. What is this place, and why me?" Lerna's expression remained calm. "You are aboard a vessel of the Intergalactic Tribunal, far from your planet, Earth. We summoned you because you have been selected to assist us." "Selected? Assist with what?" Ethan asked, his voice rising. He couldn't believe what was happening. One moment he was in his observatory, and now he was wherever this was. "You will understand soon," Lerna replied. "For now, know that your presence is vital. Refusal is not an option." Ethan's frustration grew. "Look, I don't know who you think I am, but I'm just an astronomer. I study stars and planets. I'm not some kind of hero." The other aliens murmured among themselves, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Lerna raised a hand, silencing them. "Your modesty is noted, human, but your role is not about heroism. It is about fairness. Humans possess a unique ability to see balance and justice in ways others cannot." Ethan stared at her, dumbfounded. "Fairness? Justice? You've got the wrong guy." Lerna tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. "We do not make mistakes. You were chosen for a reason, Ethan Cross." Hearing his name made him freeze. "How do you know my name?" "We know everything about you," Lerna said simply. "Your achievements, your struggles, even your thoughts. The Tribunal has been observing Earth for centuries. You, Ethan, are the best candidate for this mission." Ethan's mind raced. Was this a dream? Some kind of elaborate hallucination? He pinched himself hard. The sharp pain confirmed it was real. "What happens if I say no?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lerna's glowing eyes darkened slightly. Refusal is not an option. To decline would mean the Tribunal's failure, and failure would have consequences, ones that your planet would not survive. Ethan's blood ran cold. You're threatening Earth. We are stating facts, Lerna replied. But do not misunderstand us. We do not wish to harm your planet. On the contrary, we seek to protect it. Your cooperation will ensure peace, not just for Earth, but for countless worlds. Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He didn't trust these aliens, but if there was even a chance they were telling the truth, he couldn't risk refusing. Fine, he said finally. I'll hear you out. But you'd better explain everything. Lerna nodded, a hint of approval in her glowing eyes. Very well. Follow me. As Ethan rose to his feet, the walls around him shifted, revealing a corridor that stretched endlessly into the distance. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, each step pulling him deeper into the unknown. The Alien Tribunal's request. Ethan Cross followed High Judge Lerna through the glowing corridor, his heart pounding with uncertainty. The walls seemed alive, pulsing softly like they were breathing. The air was unnaturally crisp, almost too pure to feel real. Each step echoed faintly, reminding Ethan of just how alone he felt among these otherworldly beings. What exactly am I walking into? Ethan finally asked, his voice breaking the eerie silence. Lerna glanced at him over her shoulder, her glowing silver eyes unreadable. You are about to learn why you were chosen. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took Ethan's breath away. The ceiling stretched so high it was almost invisible, adorned with shimmering constellations that shifted and pulsed like a living star map. Around the room, dozens of alien women stood at attention, their silver skin gleaming under the starlight-like glow. Their expressions ranged from calm curiosity to cold indifference. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform, where a crystalline structure hovered, spinning slowly in midair. Lerna gestured toward the platform. This is the heart of judgment, the core of our tribunal. It holds the collective wisdom of our people. It will reveal to you the magnitude of what we face. Ethan hesitated, his gaze fixed on the crystalline structure. And what exactly do you face? You've dragged me across the universe without any explanation. Lerna stepped onto the platform and motioned for him to follow. The Tribunal has existed for millennia, ensuring peace among countless civilizations. But peace is fragile, and not all share our vision of harmony. A rogue faction has risen, threatening to shatter everything we've built. Ethan stepped onto the platform, his pulse quickening. So why not handle it yourselves? Why bring me into this? Lerna raised her hand, and a heart of judgment flared to life, projecting a three-dimensional hologram above them. Ethan's eyes widened as images of planets, alien ships, and massive battles played out before him. He saw cities reduced to rubble, starships exploding in fiery bursts, and alien beings fleeing in terror. The rogue faction believes we are tyrants, Lerna explained, her voice steady but tinged with tension. They accuse us of suppressing their freedom, of imposing rules that stifle their culture. They've rallied other civilizations to their cause, turning what began as a minor rebellion into a full-scale crisis. Ethan watched as the hologram shifted to show a striking alien woman leading an army. Her features were sharp, her eyes glowing crimson with defiance. "Who's that?" he asked. "That is Lady Teva, the leader of the rebellion," Lerna replied. She was once a respected member of the tribunal, but her thirst for power and her disdain for order led her astray. Ethan frowned, his instincts nagging at him. She doesn't look like someone driven by greed. She looks determined. Lerna's gaze hardened. Do not be deceived by appearances, human. Her actions have already cost millions of lives. The hologram faded, and Lerna turned to face Ethan fully. You were chosen because humans possess a unique perspective, a capacity for fairness and impartiality that even we cannot fully understand. We need you to act as a mediator between the Tribunal and the rebellion." Ethan stared at her, his mind reeling. "You're telling me that out of all the advanced beings in the universe, you think a regular guy from Earth is the best choice to fix your intergalactic mess?" "You are far from regular, Ethan Cross," Lerna said, her voice firm. "We have studied your kind for centuries. Humanity's ability to see both sides of a conflict, to balance logic with emotion, is unparalleled. It is precisely what we need to resolve this crisis." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling to the surface. "And what happens if I say no? What happens to Earth?" Lerna's expression didn't waver. "The rebellion's reach is spreading. If we fail to contain it, chaos will ripple across the galaxy. Earth is not immune to these consequences. So, you're saying my planet is collateral damage if I refuse?" Ethan shot back, anger creeping into his voice. "We do not wish harm upon Earth," Lerna replied calmly. "But the reality is that this conflict is larger than any single world. Your cooperation can prevent countless deaths." Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't just about him. It was about his planet, his people, and a galaxy on the brink of collapse. But how could he, an astronomer with no experience in diplomacy or warfare, possibly mediate a conflict of this scale? Lerna stepped closer, her glowing eyes softening slightly. "We understand this is overwhelming. But know this, Ethan Cross. You are not alone. The Tribunal will provide you with the knowledge and tools you need. All we ask is your willingness to try." Ethan looked around the chamber, at the silent but watchful aliens, at the heart of judgment still glowing faintly, and back at Lerna. He felt small, insignificant in the face of the enormity of what was being asked of him. But he also felt a flicker of something else, a sense of responsibility, of purpose. "Fine," he said finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I'll do it. But if I'm going to mediate, I need to hear both sides. I want to meet this Lady Teva." Lerna nodded, a faint smile breaking through her stern demeanor. "As you wish, Ethan Cross. Your journey begins now." As the platform beneath them began to rise, Ethan felt the weight of the galaxy settling on his shoulders. This was far more than he had ever imagined. But he had made his choice. Entering the conflict zone. Ethan Cross stood at the edge of the Tribunal's transport vessel, staring out at the barren alien world below. The planet was a lifeless expanse of jagged black rock and swirling red dust storms. It looked more like a war zone than a place for peace talks. His stomach churned as the ship descended, its metallic hull trembling against the harsh winds. "This is the rebellion's stronghold?" Ethan asked, turning to High Judge Lerna, who stood beside him. "It is," she replied, her expression unreadable. "Lady Teva has agreed to meet with you, but do not mistake her willingness as trust. She is dangerous." Ethan frowned. "If she's so dangerous, why are you even giving her a chance to speak?" "Because peace, however fragile, is always worth the risk," Lerna said calmly. "But remember, Ethan, you are here to mediate, not to choose sides." The ship touched down with a low hum, its landing gear crunching against the rocky terrain. A group of armored figures approached, their forms shrouded in dark cloaks that billowed in the wind. They carried sleek, glowing weapons, their postures tense but controlled. "Stay close to me," Lerna instructed as the ramp lowered. Ethan followed her down, his boots sinking slightly into the coarse ground. The alien soldiers surrounded them, their glowing eyes scanning every movement. At the front of the group stood Lady Teva. She was taller than Ethan had expected, her crimson eyes sharp and unyielding. Her dark hair was braided intricately, adorned with what looked like fragments of broken metal, trophies from battles won. She wore no armor, only a flowing black robe with crimson patterns that pulsed faintly, as if alive. "So," Teva began, her voice smooth but laced with venom. "This is the great human mediator the Tribunal sends to bargain for peace. A fragile creature from a primitive world." Ethan felt a flush of anger, but kept his composure. I may be fragile compared to you, but I'm here to listen. If you've got something to say, I'm all ears." Teva's lips twitched into a half-smile. Bold words for someone standing in the heart of enemy territory. I like that. But tell me, human, do you even know the truth about the tribunal you serve? I'm not serving anyone, Ethan shot back. I'm here to figure out what's really going on. So, why don't you start with your side of the story? Teva's smile faded, replaced by a stern look. She gestured for him to follow her. Very well. Come with me. But don't think for a moment that I trust you, or your tribunal friends. Teva led Ethan and Lerna through a series of underground tunnels carved into the rock. The walls were lined with flickering holographic displays showing battle plans, maps of star systems, and images of war-torn planets. Soldiers moved with purpose, their faces hardened by conflict. Ethan couldn't help but notice how young some of them were, their inexperience masked by determination. "This is what the Tribunal's so-called peace has brought us," Teva said, her voice echoing in the narrow corridor. "A galaxy where only the strong survive, and the weak are crushed beneath their laws." Ethan frowned. "The Tribunal says you're the aggressors, that you're trying to destabilize the galaxy for your own gain." Teva stopped abruptly and turned to face him. "Is that what they told you? That we're nothing but rebels seeking chaos? Let me show you something, human." She led them into a vast chamber filled with holograms of planets. Each one showed scenes of devastation, cities reduced to rubble, alien families fleeing in terror, and ships falling from the sky. "This is what the Tribunal doesn't want you to see," Teva said, her voice cold with anger. "These are the worlds they saved with their laws. Entire civilizations wiped out because they refused to comply. Is that what you call peace?" Ethan stared at the images, his chest tightening. "Why would they do this?" "Control," Teva replied simply. "The Tribunal thrives on order, but their order comes at the cost of freedom. Any culture that doesn't conform to their standards is seen as a threat, and threats are eliminated." Ethan turned to Lerna, who had remained silent throughout Teva's speech. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice edged with disbelief. Lerna's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "The Tribunal's methods are not always gentle, but the stability we provide has saved more lives than it has cost." "Saved lives?" Teva snapped. "Tell that to the billions who no longer exist because of your so-called stability." Ethan stepped between them, raising his hands. "Enough. This isn't helping. Look, I don't know who's right or wrong yet, but it's clear that neither side is innocent. If there's any chance of ending this without more bloodshed, we need to work together." Teva studied him for a long moment, her crimson eyes narrowing. "You're either very brave or very foolish, human. Perhaps both. But I'll give you this. Your kind's naivety is almost refreshing." Lerna stepped forward, her tone firm. "We didn't come here to argue. We came to negotiate. If you truly care about your people, Teva, you'll listen to what Ethan has to say." Teva tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Very well, but don't expect me to trust your mediator blindly. He'll need to prove himself first." Ethan sighed, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. "What do you need me to do?" Teva's lips curled into a faint smile. "Survive." The room fell silent as Teva's cryptic response hung in the air. Ethan had no idea what she meant, but he could feel the storm brewing. His journey into the conflict zone had only just begun. The hidden truth. Ethan Cross felt the tension in the air as he stepped into the archives of the Tribunal, a place Lerna had described as the heart of truth. The chamber was immense, its walls covered with shifting holographic texts and glowing images. The faint hum of energy pulsed through the room, giving the space an almost sacred feel. "You wanted answers, Ethan," Lerna said as she walked ahead, her silver robes trailing behind her. "This is where you'll find them. The history of the Tribunal is recorded here, every decision, every battle, every judgment." Ethan followed her cautiously, his eyes scanning the holograms. Some showed maps of galaxies, dotted with glowing stars and planets. Others depicted strange, ancient beings locked in conflict. There were voices, too, faint whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "What exactly am I supposed to be looking for?" Ethan asked, his tone wary. "Understanding," Lerna replied. She gestured toward a central pillar of light that stretched from the floor to the ceiling. "The heart of knowledge will show you what you seek. Place your hand on it, and it will reveal the truth." Ethan hesitated. "This isn't some kind of trap, is it?" Lerna gave him a sharp look. "If the Tribunal wanted to harm you, you wouldn't be standing here. Trust in the process, human." Reluctantly, Ethan stepped forward and placed his hand on the glowing pillar. Instantly, a surge of energy shot through his body, and the room around him seemed to dissolve. He was no longer in the archive. He was somewhere else, somewhere vast and timeless. The vision begins. Ethan found himself standing in the middle of a colossal battlefield. Alien ships hovered in the sky, their weapons firing beams of light that scorched the ground. Armored soldiers clashed in brutal combat, their cries echoing across the desolate landscape. It was chaos. "This is the birth of the Tribunal," a voice said. Startling him, Ethan turned to see a shimmering figure, a translucent image of Lerna. "Our people were once divided, locked in endless war. The Tribunal was created to bring order to this chaos." The scene shifted. Now Ethan saw a group of aliens, much like Lerna, standing together in a circle. They raised their hands, and a massive wave of energy spread across the battlefield. The soldiers dropped their weapons, their expressions blank and lifeless. "What did they do?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with unease. "They unified the warring factions by force," Lerna's image replied. "It was the only way to end the bloodshed." "But at what cost?" Ethan muttered. The scene changed again, showing civilizations falling in line under the Tribunal's rule. Some thrived, but others were clearly struggling, or worse, being destroyed. "Not all worlds welcomed the Tribunal's laws," Lerna admitted. "Some resisted. Those who refused to comply were removed." Ethan's stomach turned as he watched entire planets crumble under the Tribunal's might. It wasn't just a history lesson. It was a warning. "This doesn't look like peace," Ethan said, his voice hard. "It looks like domination." "The Tribunal believes order is peace," Lerna's image replied. "But order is not always just." A new perspective. Suddenly, the vision shifted again, and Ethan was no longer with the Tribunal. He was in a darkened council chamber surrounded by rebels. At the center of the room stood Lady Teva, her crimson eyes burning with resolve. "This is what they don't want you to see," Teva's voice echoed. She pointed to a holographic map of the galaxy, where red zones marked the Tribunal's purges. "The Tribunal calls us rebels," Teva continued, "but we are survivors. Survivors of their laws, their purges, their lies. We fight because we have no other choice." Ethan watched as images of destroyed cities and weeping families filled the space around him. He saw aliens of all shapes and sizes banding together under Teva's leadership. They weren't savages or villains. They were desperate people fighting for their freedom. "You've seen their truth, haven't you?" Teva's voice was suddenly directed at him, though she wasn't really there. "Now you must decide. Are you their pawn, or are you something more?" Returning to reality. Ethan's hand jerked away from the pillar, and he stumbled back, his breathing ragged. The archives shimmered back into focus, but the images he'd seen were burned into his mind. Lerna stood nearby, her expression unreadable. "What did you see?" she asked. Ethan glared at her. "You already know what I saw. The Tribunal isn't just keeping peace. They're crushing anyone who doesn't fall in line." Lerna's gaze hardened. The Tribunal's methods are necessary. Without order, chaos would consume the galaxy. Chaos, Ethan snapped, or freedom. "Because from where I'm standing, you're not that different from the rebels you're fighting." Lerna stepped closer, her voice low and sharp. "Be careful, human. You've only seen fragments of the truth. The rebels are not innocent in this war. They've committed atrocities too. Do not let their propaganda cloud your judgment." Ethan shook his head, frustration boiling inside him. "If I'm going to mediate this conflict, I need the whole story. No more half-truths, no more manipulations. Otherwise, I'm out." Lerna stared at him for a long moment before finally nodding. "Very well. But know this, your actions will shape the fate of countless lives. Choose wisely." As Ethan left the archives, his mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Both sides claimed to seek peace, but neither seemed willing to compromise. And in the middle of it all stood him, a lone human tasked with untangling a galaxy-wide web of lies and betrayal. But one thing was clear: someone was hiding something, and Ethan was determined to uncover the whole truth. The betrayal. Ethan Cross sat in the dimly lit chamber assigned to him aboard the Tribunal's massive vessel, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. The visions from the archives haunted him, the cries of the oppressed echoing in his ears. The Tribunal claimed to be the galaxy's guardians of peace, but their actions painted a darker picture. And yet, the rebels weren't saints either, their own hands stained with blood. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the faint glow of the alien ceiling. "What am I even doing here?" he muttered to himself. Before he could spiral deeper into doubt, a chime echoed through the room, signaling a visitor. "Enter," Ethan called out. The door slid open, revealing a familiar face, Counselor Rin, one of Lerna's closest advisors. Unlike the stoic high judge, Rin often wore a softer, almost motherly expression. But tonight, her face was grave. "Ethan," she began, stepping inside, "we need to talk." The warning. Rin sat across from Ethan, her glowing blue eyes scanning him with a mix of caution and urgency. "You've been asking too many questions," she said bluntly. Ethan frowned. "I thought that was the point of bringing me here, to find the truth." Rin hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if she feared being overheard. "The truth is dangerous, especially here. Not everyone in the Tribunal agrees with your presence. There are those who see you as a threat." "A threat?" Ethan scoffed. "I'm just one guy trying to mediate your galactic mess." "Exactly," Rin replied, her voice lowering. "And that makes you unpredictable. Some would prefer to silence you before you cause more complications." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying someone's coming after me?" Rin nodded solemnly. "There are whispers of a plot. I can't confirm who's behind it, but I wouldn't trust anyone outside this room. Not even Lerna." "Lerna?" Ethan asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "She's the one who brought me here." "Why would she?" Rin cut him off. "Lerna serves the Tribunal above all else. If sacrificing you ensures stability, she won't hesitate." Ethan's stomach churned. "So what do I do?" Rin leaned in closer, her voice barely a whisper. "If you want to survive, you need to leave. There's a rebel operative on this ship. They can help you escape and take you to Lady Teva." Ethan stared at her, unsure whether to trust her. "Why are you helping me?" Rin's expression softened. "Because I believe the Tribunal has lost its way. And because I believe in you, Ethan. You might be the only one who can bring real change." The trap. That night, Ethan followed Rin's instructions, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the Tribunal's ship. The air felt heavier than usual, every shadow seeming to conceal a hidden threat. He clutched the small data chip Rin had given him, a supposed passkey to unlock restricted sections of the ship. He reached the designated meeting point, a maintenance bay near the ship's lower decks. It was eerily quiet, the hum of machinery the only sound. Ethan's eyes darted around, searching for the operative Rin had mentioned. "Ethan Cross," a voice called out from the shadows. A figure stepped forward, a tall alien with pale green skin and sharp, calculating eyes. "I'm Krell. Rin sent me." Ethan nodded, his muscles tense. "What's the plan?" Krell handed him a small device. This will disable the ship's tracking systems temporarily. Once we're out of range, Teva's people will pick us up. Ethan reached for the device, but before he could take it, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and a cold, mechanical voice echoed. Intruder detected. All personnel to containment sectors. It's a setup, Krell hissed, drawing a sleek, glowing blade. We've been betrayed. Before Ethan could react, armed Tribunal guards flooded the bay, their weapons trained on him and Krell. High Judge Lerna stepped through the crowd, her expression colder than he had ever seen. Ethan Cross, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. You've disappointed me. The confrontation. Ethan stepped forward, his hands raised. Disappointed you. You're the one lying to everyone about peace while destroying entire civilizations. Lerna's eyes narrowed. You've been manipulated by traitors. Everything we do is for the greater good. The greater good? Ethan snapped. You mean control. You're not protecting the galaxy. You're enslaving it. The guards moved closer, their weapons glowing ominously. You've left us no choice, Lerna said. You will be detained until this crisis is resolved. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to act fast. If you really believe that, you wouldn't be so afraid of me, he said, stalling for time. He glanced at Krell, who gave him a subtle nod. Without warning, Krell lunged at the nearest guard, disarming them with swift precision. Ethan dove for cover as chaos erupted in the bay. Blaster fire lit up the room, and alarms continued to wail. Run, Krell shouted, tossing Ethan the tracking disruptor. Find Teva. Ethan hesitated, his eyes locking with Lerna's for a brief moment. There was something in her gaze. Anger, yes, but also a flicker of doubt. Then, with a deep breath, he turned and bolted toward the exit. The escape. Ethan sprinted through the ship's corridors, the disruptor clutched tightly in his hand. Guards pursued him, their shouts echoing behind him. He didn't know if Rin had planned this betrayal or if someone else had, but it didn't matter now. Survival was his only goal. He reached an escape pod bay, the doors sealed tight. The disruptor buzzed in his hand, and he quickly pressed it against the control panel. Sparks flew, and the doors slid open just enough for him to slip through. Inside the pod, Ethan activated the launch sequence, his fingers trembling. The ship's automated systems tried to override the launch, but the disruptor held them off long enough for the pod to jettison. As the pod hurtled into space, Ethan let out a shaky breath. The Tribunal's massive vessel loomed behind him, its lights glowing like a silent predator in the darkness. But for now, he was free. The stars stretched out before him, vast and infinite. Somewhere out there, Lady Teva and her rebels were waiting, and Ethan knew his journey was far from over. The final decision. The rebel ship that picked up Ethan Cross was a stark contrast to the pristine, glowing hulls of the Tribunal's vessel. It was rough, scared, and battle-worn, its interior patched together with mismatched materials that told stories of desperate survival. The crew eyed Ethan warily as he stepped aboard, his presence a point of curiosity and suspicion. Lady Teva stood at the center of the command deck, her piercing crimson eyes locked on him. Her posture was tense but composed, radiating the authority of someone who had fought too many battles and lost too much to be knave. So, she began, her voice sharp, the Tribunal's pawn finally decides to defect. Tell me, human, why should I trust you? A test of loyalty. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing for the right words. I'm not here to serve the Tribunal or you. I'm here to figure out the truth. Both sides are hiding something, but the Tribunal is hiding more. If I'm going to help stop this war, I need to understand what's really going on. Teva's lips curled into a faint smirk. You think this war can be stopped? How quaint. Her second in command, a hulking alien with skin like molten rock, stepped forward. You could be a spy, he growled. We should space you now and save ourselves the trouble. I'm not a spy, Ethan said firmly. He pulled the disruptor device from his pocket, and placed it on the table in front of him. This got me off their ship. I burned that bridge. Teva studied the device, then Ethan, her gaze unrelenting. Finally, she gestured for her crew to back off. Fine, you'll get your chance, human, but you'll have to prove your loyalty. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Teva leaned closer, her crimson eyes boring into his. We're launching an operation against one of the Tribunal's outposts. You'll come with us. If you're truly on our side, you'll fight with us. If not, you won't leave that battlefield alive. The mission. The rebel fleet descended on a barren moon, where a Tribunal outpost shimmered like a beacon of order amidst chaos. Ethan stood aboard the command deck of Teva's flagship, watching the moon grow larger in the viewport. His pulse quickened as the plan was laid out. The rebels aimed to disable the outpost communication array, cutting it off from the rest of the Tribunal. It was a risky move. The outpost was heavily fortified, and failure could cost them dearly. Teva handed Ethan a small device, shaped like a sphere. This is your task. Plant it on the array's central control system. It'll disable their defenses long enough for our fleet to strike. And if I refuse? Ethan asked, gripping the device tightly. You won't have to worry about the Tribunal's judgment, Teva said coldly. You'll answer to me. The raid. The rebel strike team landed under the cover of darkness, their ship skimming low across the moon's jagged surface. Ethan moved with them, the device heavy in his pocket and the weight of his decision heavier on his mind. The outpost loomed ahead, its walls glowing faintly with energy shields. The rebels worked quickly, disabling the outer defenses and clearing a path toward the communications array. Blaster fire lit up the night as the Tribunal's forces retaliated, the air filled with the sharp cries of combat. Ethan ducked behind a crumbling wall, his heart pounding. He wasn't a soldier, he was an astronomer, a man who had spent his life looking at stars, not fighting under them. Yet here he was, caught in a battle he barely understood. Move, human, Teva barked, dragging him out of cover. The array is just ahead. Ethan nodded, forcing his legs to move. The communications array stood tall and imposing, its spires reaching into the sky. Guards swarmed the area, their weapons trained on the advancing rebels. Ethan clutched the sphere tightly, his palms slick with sweat. He reached the base of the array, crouching behind a terminal. The rebels were holding their ground, but their numbers were dwindling. Teva's voice crackled in his earpiece. Now cross. Plant the device. The moment of truth. Ethan hesitated, his hand hovering over the control panel. The device would cripple the outpost, giving the rebels a critical advantage. But it would also leave countless Tribunal soldiers vulnerable, many of whom might not even agree with their leader's actions. His mind flashed back to the visions he had seen in the archives, the Tribunal's oppression, the rebels' desperation, the faces of those caught in the crossfire. Was he about to trade one form of tyranny for another? Ethan, what are you doing? Teva's voice snapped through the earpiece. We're running out of time. Ethan took a deep breath. His decision would define the course of the war, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy. Betrayal and revelation. Just as he moved to place the device, the control panel sparked to life, and a hologram of Lerna appeared. Her silver eyes stared at him, cold and unyielding. Ethan Cross, she said, her voice sharp. I warned you not to betray the Tribunal. Ethan's blood ran cold. How? This outpost was a trap, Lerna interrupted. We knew the rebels would come, and now we know they have you. Teva's voice cut through the chaos. Ethan, ignore her. Finish the mission. Ethan's mind raced. Lerna's presence meant the Tribunal knew everything. But why hadn't they attacked yet? Were they hesitating because of him? He glanced at the device in his hand, his heart pounding. Was there another way? A way to force both sides to confront the truth instead of annihilating each other? Ethan, now, Teva shouted. With a deep breath, Ethan made his decision and activated the device. Aftermath. The array's systems flickered, its defenses crumbling. But instead of disabling only the communications, the device triggered a galaxy-wide broadcast of the archives Ethan had seen, the truth of the Tribunal's oppression, and the rebels' desperate fight for freedom. The holograms played across the skies of countless worlds, exposing the lies on both sides. Silence fell over the battlefield as soldiers from both factions paused, staring at the images above. Teva's voice came through, filled with both fury and awe. "What have you done?" Ethan stepped back, his voice steady. "I gave everyone the truth. Now it's up to them to decide what comes next." Humanity's unique role. The galaxy was in chaos. The broadcast triggered by Ethan Cross had spread far beyond the Tribunal's expectations, exposing their oppressive methods and the rebels' blood-stained desperation. Entire civilizations were now questioning their alliances, and whispers of rebellion and reform echoed across star systems. Ethan sat in the rebel flagship's war room, surrounded by Teva and her commanders. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of his decision pressing down on everyone. A holographic map of the galaxy flickered before them, red zones marking Tribunal strongholds and green zones indicating territories that had declared neutrality since the broadcast. "You've thrown the entire galaxy into disarray," Teva said, her voice cold but steady. "And now you expect me to believe this chaos will somehow lead to peace." Ethan met her crimson gaze, refusing to back down. The truth was the only way to force change. Both sides have been lying, and the people needed to see it. If you want peace, you have to stop pretending you're blameless. Teva's second-in-command, the molten-skinned alien named Krell, growled. "Peace is a fantasy, human. The Tribunal won't stop until they crush us all." "That's not entirely true," Ethan countered. "I've seen their doubt. Even Lerna is questioning the Tribunal's methods. There's a chance to end this if both sides are willing to talk." "Talk." Teva's voice rose, her frustration boiling over. "They don't talk. They dictate. And if we don't comply, they kill." Ethan leaned forward, his voice firm. "Then make them listen. Show them you're not the enemy they think you are. But that won't happen if you keep fighting like this." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over them. Teva's gaze lingered on him, searching for something. Resolve, perhaps, or desperation. Finally, she turned to the map. "If we do this," she said slowly, "it will be on my terms." The unexpected alliance. Ethan's plan was bold. A direct meeting between Teva and Lerna in neutral territory. A derelict space station orbiting a dying star. The station, once a thriving trade hub, was now a rusted husk, its corridors silent and lifeless. It was the perfect symbol of what the galaxy had become: fractured, abandoned, and on the brink of collapse. As the rebel fleet approached the station, Ethan felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest. He had convinced both sides to meet, but their trust in him, and each other, was razor-thin. One wrong move could ignite the very war he was trying to prevent. The Tribunal's ship arrived moments later, its sleek design contrasting sharply with the rebels' battered vessels. High Judge Lerna descended the ramp, her silver eyes scanning the room. She was flanked by a group of elite guards, their presence a reminder of the Tribunal's power. Teva stood on the opposite side of the station's main chamber, her commanders watching Lerna with barely concealed hostility. Ethan stepped between them, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "This is our chance to end the cycle of violence. But it only works if we listen to each other." Lerna's gaze shifted to Teva, her expression unreadable. "You've made a spectacle of this war, human. What makes you think a simple conversation will change anything?" Ethan met her eyes. "Because for the first time, the galaxy is watching. They've seen the truth, and they won't accept more lies. If you want their trust, you have to earn it." Teva smirked faintly. "He's right about one thing. You've lost control of your perfect little empire. And now, you're desperate." Lerna's calm facade cracked, a flicker of anger flashing across her face. "Do not mistake restraint for weakness, rebel. Ethan stepped between them. Enough. This isn't about proving who's stronger. It's about proving that peace is possible. The common enemy. Before the conversation could continue, the station's systems suddenly came to life. Lights flickered, and a low hum vibrated through the walls. Ethan froze, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. "What's happening?" Teva demanded, her hand moving to her weapon. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Biological entities detected. Initiating purge sequence." Ethan's blood ran cold. "What the hell is that?" Lerna's expression darkened. "It's not the Tribunal. This station was abandoned decades ago. Whatever's activating now is ancient and dangerous." The walls began to shift, panels sliding open to reveal robotic sentries armed with glowing weapons. They moved with eerie precision, their glowing red eyes fixed on the group. "This isn't good," Ethan muttered. The sentries opened fire, forcing the Tribunal and rebel forces to take cover. Chaos erupted as blaster bolts ricocheted through the chamber. For the first time, enemies found themselves fighting side by side. "Fall back," Teva shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "We need to regroup." "No," Ethan said, grabbing her arm. "If we run, they'll pick us off one by one. We have to work together." Teva hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but don't get in my way." The turning point. Ethan coordinated with both sides, guiding them through the station's labyrinthine corridors. The sentries were relentless, their programming designed to eliminate anything that moved. But as the group fought their way to the control room, a strange realization dawned on Ethan. "These sentries weren't meant to defend the station," he said, his voice urgent. "They were programmed to destroy intruders. Someone activated them deliberately." Lerna's eyes narrowed. "You think this is a trap?" Ethan nodded. "Someone doesn't want this meeting to happen." As they reached the control room, they found the source of the activation, a beacon transmitting a signal into deep space. Lerna studied the console, her expression grim. "This isn't Tribunal technology." Teva stepped closer. "Then who sent it?" Before Ethan could answer, the beacon's signal shifted, and a hologram appeared, a shadowy figure with glowing, inhuman eyes. Its voice was cold and metallic. "You cannot stop what is coming. Order or chaos, it makes no difference. All will fall." The hologram flickered out, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. "The alliance is forged." The realization hit them all at once. The war between the Tribunal and the rebels had been manipulated from the start. Someone, or something, had been pulling the strings, pushing the galaxy toward destruction. Ethan turned to Lerna and Teva. "This is bigger than either of you. If we don't unite, we're all doomed." Lerna nodded slowly. "Agreed. The Tribunal will cooperate, for now." Teva crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "But make no mistake, this doesn't make us allies." Ethan stepped between them, his resolve unshaken. "Then let's start with this. Survival." As the two leaders exchanged wary nods, Ethan felt a spark of hope. The galaxy's future was uncertain, but for the first time, it wasn't divided by war. It was united by a common purpose, and humanity had been the key to bringing it together.